A public inquiry has been begun into the contaminated blood scandal which devastated the lives of thousands of people across the UK. The investigation centres on NHS patients in the 1970s and 1980s, many of whom were haemophiliacs, treated with blood products infected with hepatitis and HIV. It later emerged that some of the blood had come from prisoners and drug addicts in the United States who'd been paid for donating it. The scandal has been described as the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS, causing the deaths of nearly 3,000 people. Today, the inquiry in London heard harrowing stories from their relatives and from people still living with the diseases. Our health correspondent, Sophie Hutchinson, was there.
It was an emotionally charged start to this historic public inquiry. Hundreds of victims and their families sat, some wiping tears from their eyes, as proceedings began. A choir paid tribute to the thousands of NHS patients treated with blood infected with HIV and hepatitis in the 1970s and 80s. Some were just children at the time. Many were schoolboys with haemophilia, treated with a blood-clotting agent known as factor VIII. Others were the partners of infected patients who in turn became sick. The inquiry heard from dozens of victims in a commemorative film.
It devastated my entire life at the time. I went from having everything to having nothing really overnight, not even really having a future, because I was told I only got 2 or 3 years to live. Go away, make your will.
The treatment by every successive government has been diabolical. The haemophiliacs, those of us who have been infected by our haemophiliac husbands, have been tossed under the carpet, into the long grass. We've lived half lives.
Lies, deception, cover up, everything you can think of has been done to keep us in a neat little box to cause as least trouble as possible for those responsible for this.
The inquiry will seek to provide answers about how the tragedy happened, why warnings the blood was dangerous were not heeded, and whether there was a cover-up by government, drug companies and the NHS. Leading it, Sir Brian Langstaff made this promise.
The inquiry will put people at its heart, UK-wide. It will be as fast as reasonable thoroughness will permit. It will be as open and transparent as it is legally possible to be. It will be independent of government and frightened of no one in the conclusions it draws.
One of the victims was Edward Burkert, who was treated for haemophilia with infected blood and died with HIV/AIDS. His daughter Eileen came to the inquiry today looking for answers.
The compensation means nothing to me. I'm not interested in the money at all. I just want to know the truth, why they knew and they still carried on using this treatment for our fathers and such. And I just want justice. I want somebody to hold their hands up and say what happened and what they did and why they did it.
This public inquiry has the power to demand official documents and call witnesses, and expects to hear from former health secretaries. It has promised to investigate the failings of individuals as well as organisations.
There have been previous inquiries into the scandal, but this is the first time the proceedings will cover the whole of the UK, and the judge will have the power to compel witnesses to testify. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, has been looking into where early investigations fell short.
For 3 decades, patients and their families have demanded to know the truth about the scandal and whether officials at the time knew about the risks of using the imported contaminated blood products. They've been angered by the failure, as they see it, of past investigations to come up with answers. A decade ago, an inquiry under the lawyer and MP Lord Archer had no official status and was privately funded. Another under Lord Penrose, commissioned by the Scottish Government, did have the power to make witnesses attend, but only from Scotland. Campaigners dismissed its report in 2015 as a whitewash, arguing it failed to offer any conclusions. The new inquiry is the first for the whole UK to be headed by a judge with powers to compel witnesses to give evidence. Sir Brian Langstaff, chairing the inquiry, made clear today he wanted to get to the truth of cover-up allegations and had already got access to documents which had not been seen before.